ko whao, te awa, no India aho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, and I'll just keep on talking as the numbers keep on rolling in. My name's Andrew Reid. I'm the lead for the sport development team here at Sport New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to be your host here today for this Balance is Better online hui. I'd just like to start with the karakia. Te taua mai I runga, te taua mai I raro, te taua mai I roto, te taua mai I waho. Kia tau e te mori tū, kia tau e te mori ora. Tūtoru, whakamau, kia tina, aumi e, hui e, taiki e. Apologies for some slightly mangled pronunciation there. I'm on a journey like many people within Sport New Zealand and just trying to welcome the journey. Still lots more people flying in, which is awesome to see. So first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us. It's fabulous. I don't know what the number is. We'll have a look shortly, but I'd say we're well over 100 coming in through there. These huis, we did one during COVID, but really the target audience and the purpose of these huis is to recognise that if we're going to collectively do what we want to do, which is introduce a culture change around youth sport and effectively improve the quality of experiences for our rangatahi across the board, we really need to engage with a wider sector workforce. There's an enormous number of people who work in the sector in roles not just in RSOs, in NSOs and RSTs, but also in RSOs and clubs and schools and the secondary school area. And this is really our effort to try and provide a vehicle where we can bring that wider sector workforce together to share, to understand what's going on and hopefully build some collective practice. The theme for today's hui is Balance is Better in 2021, Rebuilding Momentum. There's an obvious irony in that as we all sit here in lockdown yet again. So obviously you can't do anything to control that, and my sympathies go out to everyone out there, because I know for people in the field just how practically difficult it is every time we go into lockdown. We did have a real sense of the momentum picking back up again at the beginning of this year, which is why we wanted to hold this workshop. Hopefully this lockdown is just a 7-day one and that we can continue with that increased momentum, because it's obviously really important for the work that we want to do. Just the protocols for this hour, as I mentioned before, please make sure you turn your video off, microphones down. For questions, there'll be a couple of pauses for questions. At that stage, or as you're listening to things, if you can please put any questions into the chat function. We've got Hamish Rogers sitting quietly behind the scene, and he'll be looking at all those questions and trying to distill a couple of the key themes or key questions to go at the end of each of the presentations. In terms of the content for today, I'm going to give you first of all an update from Sport New Zealand on what we're seeing as lying ahead over the year coming up and what we're hoping to be achieving. And then after that, I'll be handing over to Simon Walters and Richard Pithy from AUT and New Zealand Cricket respectively to share with you a really interesting presentation on biobanding, which is an innovative piece of work which fits perfectly into the Balance is Better area that AUT and Cricket have been partnering on, which I know you'll find really, really interesting. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump into the Sport New Zealand update now. I'm just going to share my screen, which hopefully works all right. Just waiting for it to come up. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see that. Hamish, could you just give us a quick guess that you can see that?
Yeah, can confirm.
Beautiful, thank you. Right, so Balance is Better in 2021. Just wanted to start by lacing what we do effectively back into the overall Sport New Zealand strategy. So as you're all aware, I'm sure, Sport New Zealand strategy right through to 32 is everybody active, and it's about trying to get the whole country more active, both physically and also in all the other areas that we know add value. But for the next 4 years, the focus is very much on young people, on tamariki and on rangatahi. And so the question is, how will we achieve this? There's a number of distinct sort of focus areas that Sport New Zealand's focusing on. So we're particularly interested in diversity and inclusion. women and girls in particular, and disability, also in biculturalism, and a genuine partnership with Māori. And obviously the three approaches that we've had for quite some time now around insights, locally led, physical literacy. They all kind of layer through everything that we do. So just have them in the back of your mind as always things to consider. But in a practical sense, the areas we're going to work into and how we're going to try and achieve everybody active over the next 4 years and in this year coming up, are basically that in the area of Tamariki, we're going to work with, excuse me for a moment, I've just got pop-ups getting in the way of me all the time. Hold on, I'll just go that back one. Sorry, there we go. So as you can see from here, in Tamariki, we're particularly focusing on play and on PE, which is really the HAL area. And so in those areas, they're both relatively new areas. And so we're looking to upskill what we do and increase the focus on those areas with all our partners. For the rangatahi, we're looking at active recreation and looking to build up what we do in active recreation, which hasn't previously been perhaps as much focus as it should be. And then in the sports space, we're looking to continue the work we've been doing in sports. Sports probably the longest standing area that we've worked into, and it's one that we've had considerable momentum in. It's one where there's a huge sector workforce. And for all of those reasons, we're looking to continue that basically as we carry forward. So for the sport development team, basically our focus is in that sport area. So those other areas are dealt with by other parts of the organisation, and a lot of you will deal with them as well. But for us, the sport area is the one that we're looking to make the impact in. And what we've done in terms of taking our approach for this year and actually for the next 3 years is to divide up 4 areas of work that we're going to work into. And that's sector leadership, participation and development opportunities, coach development, and parents. And what I want to do is just run through briefly for you some of the main things that we're looking to achieve in those areas over the next 9 months or so. So sector leadership, the things to be aware of in sector leadership, probably the main one, and hopefully you're all aware of it anyway, is the Bouncers Better website. So we launched this about 2 years ago now, and the aim of the website was to try and build up a specific portal where we can have authority information, really good information on youth sport and what we're trying to do in youth sport in New Zealand. We're really pleased with how it's progressed. It's got lots of good content on it, lots of contributions from the sector. And what we're hoping to do, and almost certainly will be doing, is committing to this for another 3 years, where it will become the focal point really for everything we're doing. So if you're not familiar with the website already, please go online and have a good look. Just Google Bouncers Better and you'll find it no problem. And please make sure you sign up. You'll see there's an option to sign up when you go on. And once you sign up, you'll get a weekly email newsletter with the latest stories. And it's a great way of keeping in touch, and also a great way of you sharing information with other people in your network as you go forward. A second thing that we're looking to do over this year is to have 4 of these sector workforce huis. So this is the first, and as you can see there, we're going to have 2 online ones, one in March and one in September. And for both of those, well, for the September one will be a similar purpose to this. And then we're also looking to do physical ones in June and December. So keep your eye out for information about the June one. We did those previously last year or 2 years ago before COVID when we brought Ken Martell out. And it will be a similar feel where we'll try and have a really great speaker with a message online for Bouncers Better and an opportunity to bring together 100 to 200 of people from the sector workforce together in Auckland to share and to learn together. Another thing that we're working on is the season transition campaigns, which are going to take place between the 2 seasons. You'll remember that in COVID we introduced season transition guidelines for the first time with the sector in a collaborative way, and this is kind of building on those guidelines. We'll update those, but we will also look to do a bit of a campaign in March and April, and then in September, October, around key messages as we change seasons. So watch out for the one coming up. It's just about to start shortly, and you should see things through social media and on our website around that. The other thing in the sector leadership space, secondary school sport, just wanted to highlight there that this is the beginning of a journey basically into secondary school sport for the sport development team and for the work we do. There's always been lots of great work happening in that space, but it's tended to be through what we called our young people's team. and the RSD network, which is the Regional Sport Directors Network. And it's well known that in that secondary school space, the connect between school sport and club sport and the NSOs has always been slightly problematic to try and get that running as smoothly as it could be. So what we're wanting to do is to get more involved in that area, work more closely with Secondary School Sport New Zealand and Mike Summerall and his team, work more closely with the Regional Sport Director Network, and as a result, hopefully able to provide some better guidance to NSOs and RSOs about how the whole system can work there, because obviously secondary schools are a really important place. And then the last thing in terms of the sector leadership I just wanted to touch on is the National Trainers Program. So this is a new program. Andy Rogers is leading it, and it's about to launch. You should receive some communication about it shortly if you're in an NSO or an RST. Basically, it's an elevation of some of the traditional work we've done in the trainer space. So for those of you who are familiar with coach development, you'll understand that we work on a system where we have coach developers working with coaches, and we have trainers trying to develop coach developers. So it's about building capability in people. What we're finding as we work into the wider youth sector is there's a different range of people rather than just coach developers that we want to be working with there. So we're going to try and build up a bit of a national squad of trainers that can work across different focus areas, different sports, different regions. And a starting point for that this year is we'll be starting an 18-month program with 16 selected trainers who will go through the National Trainers Program. So we'll be going out shortly calling for nominations for that, and we're looking to widen the pool. It's not just about coaching, it's about people who work in youth sport in the area of parents or system structures and participation and development opportunities as well. If you've got any queries about that, Andy Rogers is the right person to talk to. Otherwise, you should hear something coming through shortly around that. So skipping on from sector development, coach development, this is, if you like, our traditional area of work where we've always worked a lot, and a lot of you are familiar with our work and have been part of our work for a long time. What's coming up this year is, as you'll be aware, we ran for a long time Performance Coach Advance as sort of the key program, the one program really that the sport development team ran. That's been discontinued, and we've launched a new program called Coaching for Impact, which is aimed a bit deeper in the system, if you like. It's aimed more at the coaches who are working with youth in the secondary school setting and the club setting as well, but more at a community level rather than a performance or high performance level. And we've approached it a different way and gone out to the sector for nominations. We actually had 360 coaches who nominated themselves and came forward, and we whittled that down to 100 that we had interviews with, and then we picked 60 for the intake. So it's great to see that level of interest. Andy Rogers is heading this up as well. Over 2 years, those coaches will go to a number of camps. They'll have support while they're in the field. We're actually looking for mentors for the coaches. So if you're interested in that, if you're a coaching person and you're interested in potentially mentoring the coaches on the program, contact Andy and he'll be able to have a chat to you about how that works. But we're hoping that we'll be able to lift the level of coaching expertise into that youth space. And for all 360 who applied, we're looking to stay in touch with them and do further work with them. So that's an exciting program. Watch out for that as it evolves. Coaching webinars of relevance to you all. There's going to be 3 coming up relatively soon in the next sort of 4 or 5 months with Sergio Lara Barasal from the International Council of Coaching Excellence over in the UK, and from 2 familiar faces for us, Wade Gilbert and Ralph Pym. We're aware of the impact that well-chosen people from the international networks have had on the work that we do and the work that you do. And obviously with COVID, it's impossible to bring them in at the moment. So we're looking to utilise them through coaching webinars as much as we can. So watch out for that. I think the first one is actually on March the 17th with Sergio. You'll find them really interesting and informative. So just check out the website for that, or contact Andy again on that. And then the third thing in the coaching space, the regional and sport-specific coach developer training opportunities. So this is basically the focus we've had for numbers of years now of trying to build up a network of capable coach developers across the country, both regionally based ones and sport-specific ones. And where we've moved to really with this program now is, rather than delivering national 3-day residential courses, we're asking regions and NSOs to drive those courses themselves in their area. And that's gradually building up with some great responses. Very shortly, There's going to be a South Island 3-day residential for coach developers based in Canterbury, which is being pulled together by Sport Canterbury and a variety of the sports down there, which is fantastic. And also Active runs several of the other RSTs run them, and most sports now have their own coach developer programs in place. So that's a really important part of the work as well as we continue forward. Just flick on then. Participation and development opportunities. So this is an area that a lot of you will be familiar with, Alex Keart, who's driven this under the Balance is Better umbrella and it's come a long way in the last 2 years. This is really about trying to ensure that organisations, RSOs, any organisation that sets competition structures understands what good competition structures and good training structures look like for youth and adapts them accordingly. Really, really important that we have those systems and structures in place. So we've already run probably, I think, about 4 residentials for sport development leaders. Many of you will have been on those over the last couple of years. We're looking to run 3 more this year. There's one scheduled for next week. Fingers crossed that COVID allows it to go ahead and we don't have to reschedule. But those are valuable opportunities of 3 days of intensive learning together to understand Balance is Better principles in relation to system structures. The regional Balance is Better workshops. Many of you will remember just before COVID came, we were embarking on having every region holding a regional Balance is Better workshop where they brought together the RSOs, some of the schools, some of the clubs, the key people involved in the region to talk about Balance is Better and understand it more and hopefully drive some change. COVID brought that to a halt, but we're looking to really gear that up again this year as we go forward. We've already just had one in Hawke's Bay, which went very, very well. So well done to Hawke's Bay for hosting that. And over the coming months, we're hoping to have regional Balance is Better workshops in most regions. So if you're interested in that or knowing what's happening, contact your local RST and find out what the plans are for there. And then the final part in relation to PDO is our Balance is Better champions. And just alerting you to the fact that we've got a great squad of Balance is Better champions, people like Sophie Devine and Dylan Boucher from a whole range of sports. There's 11 of the ambassadors there that we can draw on. And the reason we use them is they're all achieving amazing things at high performance level, but they're all really grounded in Balance is Better principles. And we find it's really powerful when someone who's made it to the top in high performance can actually send the messages around early specialisation and other things. It really resonates with people within there. So we try and use them in workshops. We've got them available. They're contracted to give us a certain amount of time. So as you're putting things together, if you feel that using a Balance is Better champion might add to what you're doing, please contact us. You can contact Alex directly if you know Alex, or else Fiona, who sent out this invitation. Can't guarantee they'll be available, obviously, but it's a great opportunity to add some real mana to whatever you're doing. And then finally, the last area here really is parent information. So in the area of parents, we want to start influencing what's happening in that area more. We recognise the importance of parents to the sporting experience of rangatahi and tamariki, obviously, and we recognise that there's never really been a cohesive effort to try and influence more into that space. So that's what we're looking to do. Kelly Kerr on our team leads in that space. Many of you will know Kelly. And we spent a good year trying to work out the best way of approaching this, and we've pretty much landed on what the approach will be now. We're looking at a national approach which has 2 arms to it really, and one is providing quality resources, research, information and support to our partners, so that's to NSOs and RSTs, so that they can deliver what they think will work in their region or their sport in terms of parents' education, and we can support them in that space. So that's us enabling you to do a better job in that space. We're also looking at doing direct to parents via our website and through social media. Not a major campaign, but rather having really good information there that can help them understand some of the issues facing parents in sport. So that's one aspect of what we're going to do. The second aspect is Good Sports, which many of you will be familiar with. So we've entered into an agreement. We trialled it for about a year with Active, and we've now entered into an agreement, a partnership agreement with Active, which is really interesting and innovative, where effectively we're partnering with Active and we will deliver Good Sports nationally to those who want to use it. So it's by no means something that everyone has to use, but we think it's a fabulous initiative. The resources are deep and it's got a proven history. And so we're looking for partners, and this will happen in the initiative development around investment coming up through Sport New Zealand to look and decide whether or not they want to adapt good sports into the way that they work into this parent space. And if they do, we'll be able to provide support to them in a reasonably concrete way. So that'll manifest itself by basically calling for expressions of interest from partners shortly as to whether or not they want to be involved in that, and then determining the way and the type and the level of support that will go in there. So I think that'll be an exciting new initiative this year, and we'll wait eagerly to see how that rolls out. And then the final part of our parent approach is the parent segmentation. So one of the things that we've already done quite a lot of work on, I know Golf's done some great work on this as well, is actually segmenting the parents, because we understand that there's a whole range of different issues for parents with kids playing sport, and from being overzealous to not being interested enough. And so we're going through an exercise of actually creating segmentation exercise for parents, so that we can then start layering the appropriate messages to the appropriate parents. And that should hopefully help you in the work that you're doing when you're targeting different groups of parents as to what the appropriate messages are. So all of that really lies ahead of us, but it's the newest area for us, and it's one we're very excited to be getting into more as we go forward this year. So that's really an update on what we're looking to do as a sport development team, and hopefully gives you an idea of what that is, which will help you as you interact with us. So I'll just pause there before we hand over to Richard and Simon, and just ask Hamish if there's any questions there to answer.
Thanks, Andrew. There's a couple of questions come through. Apologies about the motorbike driving past. So the first question, and Andy has responded to it, but are physical hui's only going to be in Auckland? Now, Andy discussed that the intent will be to move them around, but keen to hear from this group about venues we could host these around the country in. Andrew, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for depends which sort of hui's you're referring to. For the smaller hui's, we definitely will try and move them around, because logistically that's more manageable, and cost-wise it's more manageable. For the sector-wide ones, when we bring them together, because of people coming from all around the country, we just have to take a reasonably pragmatic approach. So it's probably Auckland or Wellington for those ones. But if people have great venues or great places they think we should be looking at hosting, we'd love to hear about them, and we can factor them in.
Cool, great. Another question here from Tim Motu. When are the parent resources due to be released?
Great question. So, hi, Tim. Kelly's going to send out a communication very shortly, and then as we work through the initiative creation process with RST partners and with NSO partners, we'll talk. There are some resources available already, and there's a lot of resources available through Good Sports, and then the other ones will be in development, but it will be it'll be a continuous process basically through this year. But if you've got particular things in mind, Tim, I'd suggest you just contact Kelly directly.
Cool, great. That's it for questions as far as I'm aware. So happy to hand it back to you, Andrew, to probably introduce Simon and Richard.
Awesome. Okay, so look, I'll hand over now to Simon Walters from AUT. Many of you will know Simon. For those of you who don't, I think he's probably the most connected academic that I know of in the sector. He does a huge amount of work around sport development, actually speaks a very practical language, which makes a huge difference. And he's partnered in many initiatives over the years, but most recently Cricket has partnered with AUT over this concept of biobanding, which I must admit, when I first heard about it, I sort of thought, oh no, that sounds dreadful. And then the more I've listened to it and the more I've understood how they're exploring it and looking at how it might be used, the more interested I've become. And so I think I won't say anything more because they're going to tell you all about it, but it's a really interesting concept and also a really interesting way of looking how you can test things and pilot them effectively. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Simon and Richard.
Hey, thank you, Andrew, and kia ora. Yeah, I like the bit about the practical language. As academics, we tend to get lost in jargon, and hopefully at the end of this session, everybody will understand what biobanding is and the implications it has for their sports in New Zealand. Living in rural New Zealand, Hamish is going to run the slides for me and show a video. So Hamish, if you got those slides ready to go.
Yeah, just brought them up now.
Okay.
Okay, can we see them?
So we think we
Sorry, so I'll just
disappeared
interrupt
to a
quickly.
backdrop.
Guys, if you've got your video running, can you please turn it off? That would just help us preserve the bandwidth. Cool, continue, Simon.
Okay, Hamish?
Yeah.
So basically, we've been working with New Zealand Cricket, and they approached us a number of years ago, suggesting that they had a problem in relation to the players that were coming through to the elite level. And they felt that the players coming through to them at an elite level in their late teens were overrepresentative of what we would call early maturers. So these are the kids that really mature earlier than anybody else. They're bigger, stronger, faster. And if you're playing a sort of physical sport, they tend to excel and stand out. So to start off the project, we measured the maturation status of players playing in their national under-19 men's team, and also players attending their national tournament made up of representative teams. And in the next slide, we've got a graph which represents each of those players in relation to maturation. So Hamish, can you move to the next one? Sorry. Bit of a bandwidth problem here, but basically, hopefully it'll come around probably now. But the blue dots there represent a player, and the single red dash at the bottom represents people who are maturing what we would call on time. The red dashes up above represent players who have matured early. So as you can see in this sample of cricket players drawn from a national team and national representative tournament, every single player is above the solid red line. That means they're either early maturers or they're trending towards being early maturers. If you did this graph on a sample of the population that was taken just randomly across the population, you'd expect to see below the red line people represented down to -1, and then a further red dash line to indicate who are the late maturers. In the cricket sample, we didn't need to show that graph because the entire population was above the red line. So they're either early maturers or they're trending towards early maturity. Now, what that means in relation to the population is that on average, 17% of people mature early, 17% of people mature late, and the remaining 66% mature on time. In a cricket sample, we've got them all either maturing early or trending towards maturing early. So to explain this concept of maturation and biobanding better, we came across a US soccer video, and apologize to any Americans in the room. It's quite an Americanized version, but Andrew Tara from Cricket has told me that New Zealand Cricket are working on a Kiwi version, which will come up with some equivalent information soon. So to start us off, Hamish is going to play this little US soccer video, which I think really explains well the concept that we're going to discuss a bit further today.
Apologies.
Meet Gabriella and Tyler. They're both 13 years old and have matured early for their age. They're taller, stronger, and faster compared to their teammates on their local soccer team. This is Diego and Mia. They're also 13 years old and will mature later than their teammates. Right now, they're smaller, weaker, and slower. Since Gabriella and Tyler have matured early, it's easier for them to place more emphasis on their physical attributes and less on their technical ability. At the same time, Diego and Mia are just as skilled, but because they haven't matured as quickly, they struggle to keep up with the speed or physical nature of the game. Children grow and mature at different rates. That's just how it works, right? There's nothing you can do to change that. What's the big deal? In sports like soccer, The difference in maturity at a young age can create a false impression for coaches who often perceive players who mature early to be more talented. The players that mature later might be more technically gifted, but aren't able to show this at the time. That's a problem. In order to improve the overall quality of soccer in the U.S., it's important for coaches to have the tools to identify and cultivate the best players, not just the ones who mature the fastest. In fact, extensive research has shown that advanced physical attributes observed in youth athletes are poor predictors of success at the adult level. This means that there could be a budding national team or pro player that goes unnoticed just because she or he is a late maturing athlete. This is where biobanding comes in. Biobanding is an effective and accurate method of assessing all young athletes' growth and maturation status. So, how does it work? Biobanding is the process of grouping players based on attributes associated with growth and maturation, rather than chronological age. It's not about playing everyone who is the same height or grouping players by how much they weigh. Rather, with some simple measurements, a bit of research, and using mathematical calculations, it's possible to predict a child's future adult height and the percentage they are from reaching their future stature. By having the growth and maturation information for all players within the chronological age groups, it's then possible to bring players of similar maturity from different age groups to play together. By grouping players this way, coaches can create an optimal environment where both early and late maturing athletes can thrive while supporting them to better identify talent. This creates new challenges for early maturing players who are biobanded with those with similar physical attributes, which encourages them to use and develop their technical and tactical skills. Late maturing players have a greater opportunity to perform in an environment without being suppressed by a lack of physicality, which helps them reach their fullest potential too. Coaches are also able to evaluate a player in a fairer environment, allowing them to judge the player on their overall potential without being biased by their maturity level. This sounds great. Why not bioband every training session and match then? Biobanding is a useful additional tool for player development, identification, and retention, but it shouldn't be thought of as a straight swap for the chronological age group system. Like most things, variety and different challenges are needed to provide the optimal daily environment for players to develop. At US Soccer, we use biobanding and other innovative development tools to help to develop world-class players, coaches, and referees. Doing this brings us even closer to achieving our mission of making soccer the preeminent sport in the United States. For more information, please visit us at ussoccer.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah, thanks, Hamish. If you could show the bias, when does the bias begin slide, that'd be great. I think what I like about that video, it's easy to understand, but what we're advocating for here is not something that replaces age group sport. It's adding diversity, and we'll talk a little bit about the cricket project and how we did that. So the question from cricket was, if we've got a bias, which we're seeing in our under 19 and under 17 age group boys, when does that begin? So phase one of our project, we measured 124 boys aged between 10 and 18 years. And again, bearing in mind that if you looked at the population, you'd expect to see 17% early, 66% on time, 17% late. Of the 124 male cricket players playing in winter training programs, there were 24% who were classed as early maturers and 76% on time, and 0 of those 124 were late maturers. And that's aged between 10 and 18. Phase two, we set up a 3-day camp, which is a skill development camp, and 58 boys were selected by their clubs to attend, and they were all aged 13 years. And in that camp, where we measured them, 43% were early maturers, 55% were on time, and only one of the boys was what we would classify as a late maturer. So what's been suggested here is that the boys, especially, we'll talk about girls a little bit later on toward the end. We haven't done as much research, and neither has that been done internationally with girls. There's a big gap there, is that we've got a maturation bias in sport, and we would suggest we've got it in most sports across New Zealand and internationally. So to tell you a little bit more about the camp is Richard Pithy from New Zealand Cricket, and he'll talk a little bit more about what we actually did in the camp and what we found and the perspectives of the boys themselves and the coaches.
Thanks, Simon. Kia ora, everyone. Yeah, so we'll focus a little bit more on that phase 2, which was the Auckland camp. So this phase 2 involved Auckland Cricket quite substantially, because it was their camp and it was a pilot to replace their under-13 representative tournament. And the camp was structured around skill-based activities and games in the mornings, and then some bio-banded T20 games in the afternoons. And we had Ian Renshaw, who many of you may know, but he's an expert in skill acquisition, and also specifically a skill-based learning and constraints-based learning. So he put together the games and activities. So they were all game-based with a focus on learning through constraints. So if we had a look at the first morning, the measurements, which is we conducted the measurements to band the boys into biological, or teams based on their biological age. So if you have a look at that photograph there, that gives you an example of 2 of the teams. So the team on the right, so basically the bigger boys, that was team 1. So teams 1 to 4 were the early maturing boys, and teams 5 to 8 were the late maturing boys. So team 8 there on the left hand side is the late maturing boys. And you can see quite a substantial difference. So considering that they're all 13 years old and competing with and against each other. So in the bio-banding tournament, what really happened was that the smaller boys, the later maturing boys, all played against each other, and the early maturing boys and the teams and those teams played against each other. Now, if you have a look at the later maturing boys on the left-hand side, the boy with the blonde hair who's 4th from the left, so he's the late maturer, and if you look at him, he's probably, if you drew a line from the top of his head across to the biggest boy, he's probably reaches his shoulder, whereas that late maturing boy his predicted adult height is 187 meters, so he's probably going to end up being a lot taller than those other boys. So but it just goes to show that at this stage he's not, and the challenge that he might experience facing bigger boys is maybe sometimes a little bit greater at this age, whereas when he was playing against peers that were roughly the same size as him, it was a lot more competitive and a lot more came out of those games. So just the other thing is that the late maturing boy was 80% of his predicted adult height. So that's, if you equate that to the video you've just seen, it indicates that he's in that late maturing band. If you can move on there, Hamish, thanks. So from a New Zealand cricket point of view, our insights we were interested in kind of the skill side of the game and maybe what the games looked like, and depending on which bio-band and which pool they were in. So things that we noticed, so teams 1 to 4, so again they were the more mature players. They could throw further, they could bowl faster. There was more of an even distribution between pace and spin bowlers. When they batted, they could hit balls straight. So in cricket terms, we would call that the V. So basically, they could hit the ball straight, both aerially and on the ground. So the reasons for them being able to do that was their greater strength, longer levers, stronger shoulders, stronger arms, those sort of things. And also from a fast bowling point of view, the quickest bowler was also in that group, in that team 1. So he bowled at about just over 100 kilometers an hour. So and certainly from a throwing point of view as well, we measured the distance that they could throw, and the furthest throw was 57 meters. So if you consider that at that age, their boundaries are anywhere between 40 and 45 meters. So those more mature boys can easily throw the ball in from the boundary, Whereas if we go on to the least mature players, so teams 5 to 8, their throw distance was a lot shorter. So in the shortest throwing distance was 24 meters. So that'll give you an indication that a late maturing boy, he's going to battle to throw the ball in from the boundary. They often tended to bowl spin, and the pace bowlers were slower. So the quickest pace bowler in the later maturing group was 87 kilometers an hour. And funny enough, in that group, in the photo we've just seen, so team 8, the majority of those players were spin bowlers. So we hypothesized that because they don't have the strength and the size to be able to bowl quickly, they need to find a point of difference. So their point of difference is spin bowling. So that's kind of what we felt was the reason for it, but obviously that needs a little bit more study. And also in terms of where they played their shots, so they tended to score most of their runs square of the wicket, and the reason is they can use their full body in that shot. So because they don't have the strength in the arms and shoulders, they need to use the full body in order to hit the ball, to hit boundaries. And the other area, which I haven't mentioned in here, but was a deflection. So they'd often use the pace of the ball to deflect it kind of backward or square. So again, a deflection just requires the use of the pace of the ball, not any strength. So yeah, if you can move on. Okay. I'll just hand you over to Simon. He'll just speak about some of the insights from interviews that were taken at the camp.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So if we want to align this back to the Balance is Better philosophy, which is why we're here today. So, it clearly states that, from a Sport New Zealand, when they came out this and signed the agreement with the 5 NSOs, it's about encouraging participation at all levels of the sport and developing skill at the right pace. So what we're seeing here, it's really, really important that young people enjoy the game and that they develop skill at the right pace for them. So what we're seeing in cricket, and it's been duplicated in other sports around the world, particularly in football, is that we'll specialize kids in positions based on their physical attributes as opposed to their potential and potential in relation to skill. And they're also developing different skills. So in relation to cricket, they're using their power to hit the ball harder, hit the ball further, and not playing the skillful shots. Whereas the smaller boys are working a little bit harder and playing skillful shots. So exactly the same age, they're developing different skills, which will enable them potentially, to drop out of sport. If they get to a certain age and they can no longer dominate physically, then the time has come. They haven't developed the other skills that are really important in this sport. What's going to happen to them and their sense of competence? It was really, really important to us that the kids enjoyed the camp. Because again, going back to that participation thing, the Balance is Better. We know that kids drop out of sport because they don't enjoy it. So did they enjoy it? And they did. We interviewed them, and the things they said. The smaller kids, the quote at the top, you can read that. But basically, fun to them was not being scared, not being intimidated, and just playing the game. So that was a strong aspect for them. One of the kids said that it was the first time he'd played cricket and he hadn't felt intimidated and he really enjoyed the experience. A number of parents came up to us at the end of the day, and I think they were parents from what tended to be the smaller kids, to say that they'd really, really enjoyed the camp. And this is the first time that their kid felt as though they could fully participate, completely and safely. So what do the bigger boys say? And the second quote is representative of a bigger boy. What the bigger boy said was they enjoyed the challenge. So we know that challenge is an exciting part of sport, and it's what makes what we enjoy about it. It adds to that competitive element. So we're not really talking about winning at all costs here. We're talking about the thrill of the game and the excitement of it. And actually playing against boys with the same size as them meant they had to work harder and develop their skills. So just to close the quote there, it's definitely more challenging this week, and it's a good challenge. So the bigger boys liked it. They enjoyed it because it was challenging them to focus more on their skills. And the little boys fundamentally enjoyed it because they were playing with people of the same size. They didn't feel intimidated. So if we can move on to the next slide, Hamish, it was also important to see what the coaches thought about it. And there were 7 coaches there. It was a new experience for them as well. and basically they reinforced what the kids said. So it was about enjoyment. The first one is talking a little about enjoyment, but some are a little bit scared facing taller boys, which they've seen before, even though they're in the same age group. So they felt it was a key development going forward. The second one, again, goes back to that developing skill at the right pace theme from Balance is Better. This sort of cricket rewards better technique. So you've got the kids out there trying to focus on technique and actually get better, as opposed to winning the game. And what some of the coaches also said to us is that, you know, if it had been a representative tournament, you might turn up and you'd be out first ball and that's it, game over for that game. Whereas this, the way the games are structured, they faced, it was 25 and out, so they had a good time to spend on their batting. It wasn't that pressure of being out first ball. But again, it's important to acknowledge that this type of camp shouldn't replace what's happening chronologically, because going back to the photo that Richard showed, you know, the big lads were really tall, but they're still the same age as the little lads there. So, you know, psychologically and emotionally, they're at the same age pretty much. Okay, it's just physically where they differ. What is the potential for this? What's been done overseas is that if you actually banded players together, let's say, for example, of 13, 14 and 15-year-olds in a camp setting, you could have an early mature 13-year-old playing with a late mature 15-year-old at the same physical maturity level, okay, which is great for the skill development and the enjoyment of that camp. And you could also have the early maturers of the 15-year-olds being stretched even further with late maturers from older age groups. So we see it as a win-all, but not as a replacement for what's happening in the chronological age. And I alluded to the fact earlier on that there's not enough research done with girls. One of the problems we faced with girls' camp, and I might add to this, well, there were only 20 plus girls turned up to the camp on the North Shore. The girls didn't want to get measured. They didn't want to get weighed. So we were unable to get a representative sample of the girls that were there, whereas the boys were looking at it as a bit of a competition. Oh, yeah, how much did you weigh? I thought I was 2 kg heavier than that, and giggling about it and laughing. So there's a lot more scope for work to be done. What excites us is that cricket have taken this on. They're looking at innovative strategies to try and enhance the participation of young people playing sport. I saw recently North Harbour Rugby coming out with some announcements as well, which were really innovative, making changes to their game. So I suppose the purpose of this, and I think why Andrew and the Sport New Zealand people have asked us to come along, is to give you an idea of what one sport have tried and show the scope for what we can do with other sports. Before we go for questions, Richard, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just concur with you there, Simon. With the girls, we did find that so we had about 26 girls at the camp, and their parents are required to give consent to have their daughters, and in the boys' case, the boys' camp, the sons measured for height and weight. So a number of parents weren't prepared to do that, and that was fine. There's no pressure on them to do that. But what we noticed with the girls was that then other girls who were friends were then kind of felt a bit of peer pressure, and then they refused to get measured. So the result of that was that we probably only, well, about 20% of the girls didn't get measured. So we had to do some kind of guesswork as when we placed them into teams. So globally, there's not a lot of research into maturation of girls, so there's definitely potential for more there. And then also probably just need to add to what Simon said is that so following the camp from last year, we took some learnings from that, and some of the feedback from coaches was that they felt the games could be, the T20 games in the afternoon could be modified a little bit to include some of the learnings from the morning's games and activities. So, for example, we introduced max zones into the games for the first 2 rounds, and so that aligned to some of the activities in the morning where they were learning to hit the ball again in the V, so hit the ball straight on the ground and aerially, but also they were learning to play the pull shot, which is the hitting it square, and some of them the cut shot as well. So what we did is introduced max zones where they got double the number of runs if they hit it into those zones. So what we done, and then there were a couple of other modifications that came in as well throughout the 3 days. So we did notice that definitely had an impact, and it reinforced some of the learnings from the constraints-led activities they had in the morning. But that's, yeah, so there's probably potential to investigate that a lot more and even focus a bit on some bowling areas and that. So yeah, I think that's all from us. It's probably question time, unless you've got something to add, Simon.
No, happy to answer questions, Hamish.
Cool. A few questions are coming through now. One from Daniel Cook. Is mental maturity taken into consideration?
In the work done by Sean Cumming in the UK, he's worked with Premier League. This is one of the problems with some of the research that's been done. It's usually with elite pathway only. We think there's scope for participation pathways as well, down at the grassroots level. But the reason that they don't replace chronological age sport with biobanding is exactly because of that. There's a psychosocial maturation there that comes into play. And I think I was mentioning this to you before, Hamish, like if you've got a 13-year-old kid, you're not really going to want them engaging all season in banter with a 16-year-old. You know, there's different levels of maturation and the way they communicate with each other. So I think it's something that you do in a controlled environment, like we did with a 3-day development camp, and it offers some innovative alternatives to the weekly chronological age sport that they experience. Yeah.
I think there's a good tangent just there to Dave's question, and I'll loop back to some of the others. So in the club and school space, a main motivator is playing with your mates. Where does this fit in this model?
Yeah, again, it's not replacing. So keep them playing with their mates. These are the sort of things you could do in a development camp, which in the case of cricket replaced a representative tournament. So again, it's important that kids play with their mates. A big factor of enjoyment. Yeah.
Can I just add in something there? Is that we've kind of thought about it and don't feel that it'll replace club cricket in the chronological age at club cricket. We feel, just to re-emphasize Simon's point, is that it fits more into a replacement for representative tournaments.
Cool. There's a question here, and you might have already talked to this. Could you, in terms of banding, could you band together early maturers from the under 13s and then get them to play late maturers in the under 15s? And I guess probably maybe spoke to that logistically. Would that be something, Richard, that you guys might look to do in terms of skill development camps?
Yes. Yeah, so I think there's two opportunities there. Could be done in camps, absolutely, and possibly even when you're getting into the youth area, is you know, if there's tournaments run, they could be, instead of being under 14, 15, 16 or some such thing, it could be late on time and early maturing tournaments. So in that case, you could get a situation where you've got an early maturing 13-year-old with a later maturing 15-year-old. So I think there's a few opportunities, and there's potential to do more research, but also to try out things in that space.
There's quite a few questions coming through now, so I'll just take two more. One that's just coming from Carla. How does ethnicity factor into the mix?
Yeah, great question, Carla. This has scope for New Zealand to lead the way in maturation at this sort of level, and not enough is known. Okay, so the calculations we use are based on population statistics. It would be really good to look at differences in ethnicity in relation to maturation. It'd be really good to look at differences in maturation in relation to girls and boys. So yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah. I don't know the answer to it. Yeah.
Cool. And the last one, I'm going to try to tie two in together. So probably around the logistical considerations. Part A, I guess from Rebecca's question, could you get the banding just from taking the height or arm spans of girls and taking away the weight factor? And if not, what are some considerations, I guess even if they're early considerations, with how you could address the girls?
Do you want to answer that, Richard, or do you want me to?
Yeah, look, probably from whether there's a calculation you can use just using arm span and height, I'm not sure. That's probably it's probably a research area, and the researchers would be the people to be able to respond about that. Yeah, look, I suppose what we tried to do was ensure that there were no males involved in the measuring at all. So even though I was there, I wasn't anywhere near where the measuring took place. So we tried to take away that aspect to it, and also all the coaches in the girls' camp were all female, and a number of them were current Hearts players. So we tried to remove that aspect to it, but yeah, it's a do one. I probably don't have any clear answers, but it might be something that we look at and see whether there's another way of gaining those measurements. I think the reason why we've gone with the height and weight was the Camus-Roche method, which is one of the most accurate ones, apart from actually X-raying their wrist and having a look at the growth plates. This was kind of the next best accurate unintrusive method, but maybe Simon can kind of mention that. But it is, yeah, the girls' space is an area that globally is not, there's not a lot of research, and it's there's potential there to do more. So it's a good suggestion, and it's probably something we need to look at further.
Guys, we're running out of time here. A lot of the other questions they're really good questions, particularly around I guess some logistical considerations for applying biobanding. If your questions haven't been answered, I would encourage you to contact Richard and or Simon. Richard and Simon, are you happy if we share your email addresses? Yep. Okay. We'll call it there, and I'll hand it back over to Andrew.
Great. Thank you, Hamish. Thank you, Simon and Richard. Really, really fascinating, and great to see all those questions coming in from it. And I mean, to me, just reiterating some of those questions, to me, my initial reaction was a bit of concern over if it was meant to be replacing age group because of the whole social side. But the more I've learned about it, this idea of if we're going to replace representative tournaments with development camps, to be able to provide a different way of running development camps and innovation that allows better participation. It's an exciting new area to explore, and that's what we believe in. We believe in exploring and piloting and testing to try and find better ways to meet the complex world that we're in. So thanks, guys, and we look forward to seeing what's going to happen as we continue with that. I won't hold everyone up because we're right on the hour now. It's been fantastic we had 172 people, I noticed at the beginning, and we've still got 150 there, which is awesome after an hour. I would just say to everyone on this call, nearly all of you will be there because you're on a database we've created of about 360 people working in sport development and with youth. And what we want to do is widen that database so that we can basically create a bigger community of practice. So if you're aware of other people you know who you think would value this and would be good for this, please flick through to Fiona, who sent the message invite, any other names, or if you know any of the members of the team, myself, Alex or Andy, just contact us direct. As I said, we'll have another one of these later in the year and we'll get feedback from you. There will be a little simple survey that gets sent out following this, asking you for your feedback. Apologies for the high level of push and talking that you receive. It's very hard to do anything interactive in this environment, but we're open to suggestions and trying to make it as good an experience as you can. So without any further ado, thank you very, very much for your time. We really appreciate the work you do. At Sport New Zealand, we fully understand that we're there to support you and what you're doing, and we'll continue to try doing that. And hopefully COVID goes away and we can get stuck in for this year. Thanks very much and travel well. Ngā mihi.